Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1966 giallo film The Murder Clinic, and it's not a great one. I'm not huge on this. It literally is in the lower rankings of all the giallo films I've ever seen. There are some really excellent ones out there, and at some point maybe I'll do like a top 10, top 20 list for me personally. But this one's way down there. This will not even get close to that. I think it's from 1966, so it's kind of before giallo really hit its stride, before it really hit its popularity, and you were getting a lot more better giallo films, although you were just getting a lot more in general, so you're getting some really terrible ones too. Slaughter Hotel comes to mind on that, but yeah, it's really before the popularity, and certain directors had really put their spin on it. Obviously, like Mario Bava did a lot of great things for giallo. Dario Argento did, Sergio Martino, Luciano Ercoli, Umberto Lenzi, people like that. So you could keep going. But anyway, this is about the murder clinic. Let's get into it. This one's directed by Elio Scardamaglia. Now, there is a little bit of a dispute on that, and I'll talk about it after I get to the writers, because it involves one of the writers. Written by Ernesto Gastaldi. Now, if you know that name, or if that name just sounds familiar, Gastaldi has done a lot of giallo scripts, and a lot of good ones too, actually. Here some samplings of writings from Gastaldi, who has a lot of writing credits on IMDb. The Vampire and the Ballerina, Werewolf in a Girl's Dormitory, The Whip and the Body, Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key, All the Colors of the Dark, The Case of the Bloody Iris, The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward, one of my favorites, Torso, The Suspicious Death of a Minor, The Scorpion with Two Tails, The Case of the Scorpion's Tail, Death Walks on High Heels, and Death Walks at Midnight. Just think giallo and listen to those titles, and that's a wonderful body of work for a writer, as far as giallo goes. Luciano Martino was also involved with this one, who also worked on scripts for To Hell and Back, So Sweet, So Perverse, Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key, Screamers, Delirium, and The Whip and the Body. So obviously Luciano Martino had also worked with Ernesto Gastaldi on some screenplays before. And this is also apparently based on a novel by Robert Williams, and the novel is called The Knife in the Body. So Murder Clinic sounds more fun in my opinion. Now, Ernesto Gastaldi has apparently said that it was really Lionello De Felice who shot the overwhelming majority of this film, and Scardamaglia was just a producer who ended up coming in much later, did do some shooting, did actually do some directing on it, but did way, way less than De Felice did. So it's kind of this thing where, like, people talk about De Felice being involved with this film, but it's debated, because Scardamaglia actually has the name on there. De Felice, it's just, was working on it per Gastaldi, and apparently per Gastaldi did the majority of it. But let's be honest, who really wants that much credit for this particular film? Because it's not that great. It's not that great. It's not terrible. It's not like Slaughter Hotel, but it's not great. The panning around the house in the very beginning of the film during the opening credits is a nice kind of thing to actually do something during the opening credits. Because with a bunch of giallo films, they'll just have like a screen just showing like one freeze frame shot, and they're just running through the credits, and that's just boring. So the fact that they're showing kind of this, what seems like a killer's POV, lurking in the building with kind of like limited light, so it's like maybe they're using a flashlight to look through, it really gives this kind of like prowler view. It really kind of sets up the film for an interesting perspective, and kind of like sets the atmosphere as being, very crimey, very, I don't know, it's not really a word, but from a criminal POV, so something bad is going on. It kind of like gives you this, I'm not going to say necessarily on the edge of your seat feeling, but it makes it a little bit tense to start. Then they obviously end up showing like the shadow of the killer walking through, and I think that adds to it as well. The first red herring is when the straight razor falls out of Ivan's pocket, and he actually acts very suspicious as well. If you've been watching enough giallo and you watch this one, when the straight razor falls out of Ivan's stuff, then you're immediately just like, obviously it's not Ivan, because it's way too early to be dropping a hint on the person who's actually going to be the killer in this. So Ivan automatically out for all of us giallo fans. Janie, also known as Jane, being a mute is a way to increase the peril for her since she can't actually yell out for help. This is something I talked about in my review for Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toy Maker, because the kid in there, after a traumatic experience, was mute. And that's something that filmmakers can use and do use to kind of up the danger. You know, think about also a film like Hush, where I believe the person was also mute in that one. I'm trying to think. Or in a film like, well, no, forget that one. Hush is a better example. Anyway, but yeah, just think about like taking away senses from a character. It puts them at even more of a disadvantage, and that's supposed to kind of heighten the peril in the minds of the audience because they're not, they don't have all their faculties working at their peak, so they're not as advantaged in trying to get away. And obviously Janie ends up dying, so yeah, didn't work out for her. Although she does yell before she gets killed. And that kill scene was terrible, by the way. That kill scene was awful. It literally just looked like the killer like jumped on her and then ran away, and and it's like she was dead. I didn't even see blood. I saw no blood. And that's just, I'll talk about it later, but in general the kill scenes were terrible in this. I wasn't aware you could lose control of a straight razor while swinging it, but it sure does happen with the killer. Yeah, when the first scene where the killer's going to kill someone, they're going after Janie in her bedroom. Like, the wild swings and just, like, hitting the nightstand. Like, I understand if you're, like, swinging, like, a big broadsword or a halberd or, like, something large and unwieldy. Like, I understand that. That makes sense. But for, like, a very easy-to-control small straight razor, no sense. It's just, like, what is going on with this killer? Like, just like wildly swinging. Do they just not have control of their own arm? Is that what's going on? It's just a really weird thing. And there's a bunch of those kind of just like things that look and feel off in this film that just kind of detracts from it, in my opinion. When the killer runs into the room and loses the guard at night, you're supposed to suspect that Dr. Vance is the killer because he pops into the room after the guards already come in there. You're not supposed to suspect who it ends up being, which is Elizabeth, which giallo fans probably at that point, like myself, immediately started suspecting Elizabeth. Because, A, they do the whole thing where they cut to Dr. Vance immediately, who I won't call Robert from now on in this review, because that's how he's referred to most in the dialogue. So he pops in, so you're supposed to really focus on him. So being a real giallo fan, you know, okay, they're really pointing to him. Obviously, it's not him then, and there's a lot of other stuff involved later that they point at him. Also, a lot of times in giallo films, they end up using females as the killers as a way to try and trick people because, especially back then, it was mainly just seen as males were the killers. So it was a good way to kind of hide the identity because the audience wouldn't immediately be assuming it's one of the male characters in the film and being less likely to assume it was a female character. So, yeah. Anyway. So I did suspect Elizabeth from the get-go, pretty much. I mean, that was the first time that she's revealed in the film, and I immediately was suspecting her as the killer, which ended up being right. The quick dismissal of Mr. Bird sleeping all day I thought was kind of suspicious, and maybe that would end up tying in at some point. That's when Mary, the new nurse, is being walked around by the older nurse. I don't even remember her name. She wasn't even really important to the film. When she's kind of showing her around, and there's one room they don't even go into, but she's taking her into all the other rooms, and she's just like, oh, that's Mr. Bird. You won't even have to worry about him. He sleeps all day. So I thought that was going to be an introduction, like a quick introduction to something that would end up coming into play later. And I was kind of hoping for that because giallo films do a lot of that, but nothing. It was just like this real throwaway thing. Maybe that was supposed to be like a small path created for audience members to their minds to start going down like mine did, but I don't know for sure. Fred having potential violent outbursts is yet another red herring here. Obviously, the film points very heavily at Fred at one point because I believe they say he's schizophrenic, and so they use that to say, oh, you never know, he's dangerous, he can end up killing someone. And at one point, he's actually put behind bars because he tries to kill Giselle, or Giselle, I think is how it's said in there, which she's a whole another thing. I'll get to her. The disfigured woman in the attic is yet another red herring. The disfigured woman, also known as Laura, but initially when I was taking notes, you don't know who she is. You know, you're just seeing a very messed up face, which, by the way, the practical, like the actual cosmetics of her face were not bad. Like, the disfigurement that they did up on her wasn't terrible. It was good enough, in my opinion. Kind of reminded me a little bit of... Was it Slaughter Hotel that had the same type of thing? No, it wasn't. It was another one I really didn't care for, and I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it'll hit me later. The whole situation with Giselle in the woods seems extremely random and out of place. It's very weird. She just, like, first of all, I don't understand her backstory. Like, what was going on there? Like, she's with this guy in this horse-drawn coach. It seems like she's a prisoner of his, in a sense, because he makes a comment about, like, don't try and get away. Now come help me with, fixing this because something goes wrong with the carriage. And then she, like, whacks him, and then he gets trampled, so he's dead. And then she, runs away. She stumbles across Robert getting rid of Jane's body in a, like a cave. And... it's just so random. And then she sees this, and then she goes outside and, like, lays down and plays like she was, like, unconscious or something. And then that's how she ends up getting taken care of by Robert, taken to his estate, all that jazz. So I kind of feel like it sets her up to kind of be an unscrupulous person in the beginning, which I guess makes sense for leading to the whole blackmail thing, where she's then in this mode of just, like, collecting information on Robert so that she can blackmail him and try and get some sort of money. But how she gets inserted into this whole story is really weird, seems very random, is very out of place. They could have done it in many other ways, and I kind of wish they had. So why does Elizabeth love Robert? She says that he cheats on her. She also calls him potentially a murderer. Although I guess in retrospect, she knows that he wasn't a murderer because she refers... in the sense of what Laura was, that situation with Laura where eventually it gets revealed in the flashback that he, like, put his hand on her and she fell into that pit of liquid lime, and that's what made her so disfigured. So she's kind of referring to that. So I guess in retrospect, she's saying it to him, but she personally knows that it was her, so he's not actually a murderer. Also, all the actual killings that are happening are at her hands. So, yeah. But why does she love him so much? Because she keeps talking about how he will just get with, like, any woman. And, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I like how no music is used when Giselle is following Robert in the dark throughout the building. It lets the sound design really shine. And I will say that is a bright point of the film. The sound design was good. The music was actually also pretty good, so I did enjoy the score for this as well. But I love those moments where something kind of potentially intense or exploratory is going on within a film and they drop the music out, because it really lets you focus on that sound design, and it kind of gets you even more in the mentality of the actual character who's doing this sneaking around in the dark. It also gives you this feeling that, like, anything could happen at any time, and it leaves you more open to being susceptible to jump scares, in my opinion. Now, they didn't end up using that in this film, but they definitely could have, and probably would have gotten me with one. Just saying. When Fred goes after Giselle in her room, they're trying to push the audience to tie that to Jane's death, to implicate Fred in Jane's death. Because since he shows up to her room and goes after her, it's supposed to kind of remind the audience members that, oh, this is the same bedroom where Jane was chased from and eventually killed. And maybe this is just Fred returning to the same place to kill yet another person living in this room. So that's why they do that. Or at least that's what it seems to me. Mary is supposed to seem like the innocent and pure character. So the fact that she does not see Fred as a threat is kind of a hint that he is not a killer. She's supposed to be the one who is the most pure and innocent. So the fact that she sees no threat in someone like Fred, that is supposed to be a very subtle indicator to the audience that this person who is good and therefore can see good in others sees good in Fred, knows that he's not actually capable of killing except for himself. Now, there is kind of a question in my mind of, did Fred actually kill himself, or was it Elizabeth in the end who did kill him? Now, I am erring on the side of thinking that he actually did kill himself because he had said things about, wanting to off himself before. Also, it's not Elizabeth's MO to go after guys. She had only been trying to kill women, and her motivation obviously was jealousy because she was afraid that either her husband was cheating on her with those women or that he would. So, just saying. Giselle is very abrasive and really treats the clinic like her own personal space. That's the thing that's kind of like took me aback with her as a character, and you can't like her for that reason. Like when she dies, I was just like, okay, whatever. Like I hate that character. She sucks. Because she shows up in this place and she's being treated like a guest, basically. Because obviously most people are not there because they want to be there. They're there because they need help. And she's a different situation. Like she's found and Robert is just like, okay, I'll help you. So he's being nice, and she's just like a jerk to everyone. She's so abrasive. And then on top of that, she sneaks around and tries to gather information for blackmailing Robert. Like, she's a terrible person. So when she eventually gets it in the end, it's just like, okay, bye. Like, sure, I'm okay with this right now. I already talked about that. I get the Giselle wanting to blackmail Robert, but then I don't understand that she's trying to come onto him and trying to have sex with him at that point. Like, she literally blackmails him and then is like, oh, I wonder what it'd be like to have sex with a murderer. And it's just like, it's such a weird, wacky thing, but giallo! That's the kind of weird stuff that giallo does. Now, the other thing, though, is that I watch it dubbed, which a lot of times I watch it dubbed because I don't know, it's just like one of those comfort things that I like with giallo films. It's like I just feel like they're more fun that way for me personally. I'm not against subtitled films at all. I actually review a decent amount on my channel. It's just as far as giallo goes, like I want them dubbed because it just adds that extra little giallo-y comfort for me. I don't know. It's quirky. So I'm saying that to say that I don't know that the English dubs were saying the exact same thing as the actual Italian text in the script at that point. So she could have not really been coming on to him at that point. I don't know. I like how Robert just outright asks Mary to lie about Giselle ever being there, especially because I'm pretty sure he knows that she's like a good person. He could have also just taken care of everything himself. Like the fact that he intentionally goes out of his way to like pull her aside and be like, okay, I need you to say that she was never here. We're going to cover this up. Like, she's a new employee, and that casts terrible suspicion on him because people have also been dying that, like, he would think she's going to think I'm a murderer when I, try and cover this up like this. But the other thing is he could have just taken care of it. He literally could have just taken care of it like he did with the whole Jane situation. And because then when she was gone, he was telling people, oh, she got picked up. Like, they came and took her. So I assume that he was going through that, like dealing with things in that way because he didn't want, the media to eventually find out or anyone to find out that there had been actual murders at his clinic because then he wouldn't be getting patients and then he wouldn't be making money, blah, 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 blah. The flashback of Robert's telling of what happened to Laura seems like she was some sort of simpleton pet that was being kept around by him and Elizabeth. Like, especially if you look at the part where they're like playing cards, like she looks like there's nothing going on up here. Like literally, she's like, like she looks so dumb. And it's weird. Like, why would you make a character like that? Because then when she eventually ends up talking, and is actually more of a character later in the film, when she tries to keep Elizabeth from killing, she talks like she's intelligent. Like, she's like a normal person. But, like, in this flashback, she's like this weird simpleton. And it does seem like they're just kind of, like, keeping her around as some sort of, like, novelty. I mean, obviously you can tell that Robert has sexual interest in her, but you don't understand why Elizabeth is fine with that, and she is also kind of looking at Laura in the same way that Robert is. It's really weird. So it really seems like she was like this simpleton pet for them. It's very odd. But giallo, The scene of Robert accidentally pushing Laura into the lime puddle is funny, especially because like he barely touches her. Like he's just like, oh, he like gets his hand just like on her shoulder the slightest bit, and she's like, whoa, like really falls over. It's and here's the thing, like she wasn't even leaning on that rope, because what ends up happening, you find out later, is that Elizabeth like unlatched the rope from the other side and she just fell in. Well, in order for that to happen, she would have had to have been leaning on the rope, but she was never actually leaning on the rope. Yes, I believe she had her hand on it, but she was never leaning on it. So it was just, I don't know, another one of those things that just like takes you out of it for a minute, because you're like, this feels very off. The whole time you believe Robert knows exactly what's going on, but it's most clear when he pushes Fred's suicide as solving everything. So it is kind of left ambiguous to a degree at the end whether Robert really did know what was going on with Elizabeth or not. I could see it going either way. I probably lean a little bit more down towards the path of he didn't actually know that it was her, but I could see it going the other way because obviously he's like covering things up after the fact. But when he starts saying like very definitively that Fred killed himself without really looking for that long at the body, it does seem suspicious. It does give you this idea that he does, like, he is maybe aware of what Elizabeth is doing and he's just cleaning up. But like I said before, I actually do lean more towards thinking that Fred actually did kill himself. The reveal of Elizabeth as the killer was It wasn't that great. Didn't have a lot of impact. It, maybe part of that is that I was already guessing it was her. I guess maybe if it was a total surprise, it may have been better, but I don't know. For me, it was just fell flat. Really, it's Robert's fault that women are getting killed. If he'd kept it in his pants, none of this would have happened in the first place. I mean, truly, like, stay faithful to your wife and people wouldn't have died. I mean, obviously, it's Elizabeth's choice to then kill people. She could have just left him, but it's obvious that she was totally infatuated with him, and it's just not cool to cheat on your wife in the first place. Although, in that flashback, she did seem very okay with it when he's obviously pursuing Laura, so I don't know. Very complicated. That relationship seems way too complicated. The kill scenes are terrible in this film. Like I said, they are awful. Like I was saying about the scene with Janie when she died, it literally is like the killer jumps on her and then runs away and she's dead somehow. It's just like terrible. I do like the shooting location though. It's a large building that you have a hard time understanding how it's laid out. I kind of like that because that maintains mystery when people are in an exploratory mode, like Giselle was for a large part of her portion of the film. And you really do feel like the entire duration of the film, they're just exploring this building, like the whole time. The fact that it just keeps going and going and going. And I like that, especially because it's a cool looking location. There is a lot of interesting stuff to look at. And it just seems like it's like, now here's another room, now here's another room, now here's another room. Like, I like that kind of exploratory aspect of films. So I did enjoy that about this. So, how am I going to rate this? Out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm just going to give it a 1.5. It's not that great. I was between 1.5 and a 2, so I did consider giving it a little more of a break, but it's just not very good. 1.5 stars on this one, but I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are, so go ahead and put it in the comments. Do you like it, hate it, in between? And also, are there things that you think I missed about this that we can talk about? Bring it up. I'm always interested in hearing what other people see in films and also what their opinions are, because it's good to take in differing opinions because it might actually change my opinion on what I saw. You never know. There may be things I didn't consider. But do me a quick favor, please. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, you rock, and thank you so much. If you haven't, it is quick, painless, costs you $0, and it is the best way to keep me motivated and to pay me back and say, hey, thank you. Thank you for putting free content out there, because I don't charge anyone for it. At this point when I'm doing this, I'm not making money through YouTube or anything, so, it's just something I'm doing, and I put a decent amount of time into it. So please, pay me back. Hit subscribe. Also hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, and if you watch them relatively soon after they go up, it will help me with getting more views and all that jazz, so I would appreciate that. But regardless, I really do thank you for taking your time to watch this. And until next time, keep it brutal.